Nature of Predators, Book 2, Chapter 59. Memory Transcription Subject, Tassie, Bison, Alien Liaison. Date Standardized Human Time, November 13th, 2160. The wall of ships in front of Nishtel was comprised of diverse, formidable craft. There were 6 figures on each side, making this an unimaginable clash of metal war machines. The differences in strategies within the Sapient Coalition's ranks added personality and made us harder to account for in a uniform way. Doser mechanic vessels were hanging by to patch up damaged drones on the fly. Mazic exterminator vessels, once used to rain fire on colonies, were now using their bloated bombing bays against the hostiles. The Harkins chameleon ships, as the humans called them, projected a video of sky behind them on the feed, attempting to blend in. Even the Crocodile's plasma-focused vessels had gotten an upgrade since their shellacking, attaching their life shapes to the top of human warships, along for the ride, free to fire all shots and attach if needed. There were many more innovations, some of which would undoubtedly prove more game-changing than others. The Gojid had claws wrapped around their outside of their ships, like a shell meant to stop blows from striking the interior. Perhaps this logic was inferred from the natural defensive spikes. The Fizzins had ramming ships specifically shaped like their horns, which caused the Nevox to attempt to compete with them with a 2-pronged ramming extension, looking like a human fork. I thought the Vendal's prior showing blew both out of the water, but it still gave us a different angle. Skalga, Earth, and Leon had sent about 1/3 of those ships on the defensive lines, not counting their earlier offensive. Last but not least, there was the shield offerings, mostly belonging to the SC's newest, most tepid allies, and the Leshy and the Dirtian, who brought a more defensive angle. They were lean, well-armored, and geared towards point defenses. There weren't a lot of them, with the grey avians sending a few dozen and the amphibians offering a few hundred. Then again, even the average coalition members had only sent about 1,000 or 2 ships. Together with a major power surplus of ships factored in, we had over 150,000 spacecraft to greet the invaders. The situation should be winning for us, having an outright numerical advantage. The question was whether we could save Nishtal from any harm. If the Sapient Coalition, in all of its might, and each member showing up, can't stop the drone fleet in its tracks, who's to say they can protect any world? How could they ensure that bisons are never bombed from the heavens again? The plan is simple, Anzo commented, as every eye in the auditorium watched for the first exchange of munitions. We attack as one, with all these ships, the surface-to-space missiles on Nishtal, and an unholy amount of nuclear and antimatter warheads that have been mostly donated by Earth. Keinfer, you were awfully quick to replenish your supply after using them to defend your home. The Secretary-General ducked her head in acknowledgement. We used them to protect our home once, now we're using them to protect someone else's home. Better to have them and not need them, than to need them and not have them. The technocracy lives by that doctrine. We're about to see a lot more action than we can keep up with, so be prepared for a lot of jumping around. The Gojid Prime Minister piped up. Can we get an update on how each species' innovations are faring? I'd like to know whether our new shield and protector's claw ships work. That name is a mouthful, and I'd advise you to workshop it. Anyhow, everyone will get a thorough briefing in time, and we will try to show the various angles. Your generals also have their own feed and ship data. Overall, their focus is mainly on Nishtal's health and the broad status of the battle, watching for weak points and transmitting tactical adjustments in real time. That's what our analysts are doing. It's more devastating to us if we lose our fleet, because we have all of our spaceships here. Crocodile Ambassador Calcel seemed worried that, even after stapling his ships onto the resilient human craft, he might lose the rest of his newly minted armada. We lose enough vessels, and we're left defenseless, even if we win this battle. Nishtal is left defenseless should they return for round 2. Naltor tapped his microphone, a sage look in his eyes. Leave tomorrow's problems for tomorrow. You rebuilt your fleet once. Should you lose this one, you'll rebuild it again, stronger, because that would mean it wasn't powerful enough to make a difference in combat. Your allies will keep you safe in the meantime. We will stand with Nishtal for as long as it takes, Keinfer promised. Ultimately, my friends, there are no Gojid ships, human ships, Crocodile or Dirtian ships here today. There are just the Sapien Coalition ships, standing as one. Because of that, I believe that we're going to claim the most commanding victory in our organization's history today. The question is, do you? Onzo wiggled his ears mischievously. Of course I do. We took out 20,000 and changed ships with a few Skalgun scrappers and some slapdash bombs. Now they meet our real fighting force, where numbers are in our favor. 85% left to go. Should be easy as pie. There's more Skalgun scrappers and slapdash bombs here too, Governor Leysa commented. We've prepared plenty of this defense, and they're flying right into our waiting arms. We're ready. The moment approached on screen, with the enemy encircling Nishtel. They looked like an insect swarm from the viewing drone watching from afar above the planet's north pole. The nuclear warheads were mostly positioned on the planet's lunar satellite, and I could see them ready to be fired at a moment's notice. The explosions would provide a quick and easy way to reduce the invaders' numbers out of the gate. The United Nations had flown in powerful kinetic railguns, since the ship-busting lasers were ineffective against the liquid armor. It all followed their space harpoon gunplay, which I knew they'd start off with here. So far, our foes didn't have an answer to the piercing rods, and I doubted that they would compensate for the weapon's presence now. The enemy won't have a response to our plans as long as they're not relaying their strategies back to home to someone. They haven't made any adjustments since Tenzas or Tusk. We have. Our feed cut over to the eyes of the technocracy drone, thrusting our perspective into the heart of the battle. Flanked by tens of thousands of allies, our vantage point vessel surged forward. Sensors revealed human nanodrones pouring out in mind-bending quantities from the lurking spacecraft carriers. I watched the nuclear warheads crest ahead of the camera. Their speed somehow surpassed the swiftness of a starship. There was a cue. Fire the harpoon railguns. Holes of tungsten were hurled through the void as microscopic automatons and thousands of nukes inundated the enemy. Their dust guns couldn't eradicate enough threats to avoid the preliminary impacts, with telltale flashes amid the endless night. For the brief moment they lasted, those detonations were brighter than the stars, a literal shining light in the darkness. I channeled Keinfer and Onzo's optimism, allowing my own to make a brief appearance. I wanted to believe in a swift victory the Terran leader had promised with such confidence. The drone whose eyes we were looking through zigged and zagged, twirling around particle beam munitions and throwing up missile interceptors. The Sapien Coalition's fleet felt powerful. This was our chance for us to push the enemy back and put this entire strike force down for good. From this view, the entire battle seemed much less impersonal. That's what 5 digits worth of casualties looks like, Onzo growled. Now that we've hit that figure, it's time for us to speedrun the next 6 digits. Wipe them out. My technocracy drone offered suppressing fire with its particle beams, giving Vindal scrappers a chance to move in. The collisions were almost imperceptible without magnification. Once the lens zeroed in on a few enemy hulls for the viewer's benefit, I could see metal lacerated by the detachment of the ramming points. Metal weapons carved them up like a fish being gutted, leaving disabled husks and torn bogies in their wake. Maziks unloaded antimatter bombs to complement their efforts, with ships built only to house those explosives. Our fleet had kept hostiles far back from Nishtel's orbital range, so they had no chance to get a crack on the surface. We were ready to shoot down any inbound explosives, even if they did get a shot off. The humans pelted the foes with mini missiles, then harpoons, followed by kinetics. In the brief span, I diverted my attention to their efforts. Alternating between every munition, we had kept the enemy on their toes. The Crocodile weapons, using the docking port to staple themselves to the UN's bulky fighters, had plasma weaponry covered. While it was ineffective against the hostile drones, they took to picking off missiles lobbed our way. Nishtal's own surface-to-space missiles had also rode in to badger the enemy, a successor to the Terran's warheads. The technocracy ships looped back in time with the Vendel, reforming defensive positions. Our foes would come to us in this instance and might find it to be like running into a brick wall. Secretary General Keinfer used the laser pointer to highlight the enemy ships on the screen. If you look across the formation, you'll notice there's very little variance in the hostile drones. I think it's worth noting how much easier it is to gather intelligence on a single ship mold. Also, the uniformity is in striking contrast to our union of multiple species. They're arrogant. They think that these ships are the end-all, be-all. That they've accounted for every possible weapon, and they don't need anything different in their fleet, Onza added. It reminds me of the ubiquitous design seen in the Federation military. I'd like to know if they're an unimaginative single species, or if there's something more at play. It should be enlightening when we acquire some answers at last. The ships are quite good. Yours should seem a bit better, Crocodile Ambassador Council countered. Oh, they are. So far, the Sapien Coalition has only taken 1,000 hits. The enemy is scrambling from sensor overload with all of the different unknown threats. Our kill count here in the Inner Sanctum, hovering around 20,000 at the moment, speaks for itself. The kill-to-death ratio only grows to our advantage. Now, we keep the heat on them and can afford to double-team them. They'll be below 6 figures any moment. The Yoto's prediction would likely be true, as the Physons and Nevox brought their weaker ramming ships into the bowl on what the Vendel had built. The Nevox two-pronged ramming extensions was interesting, especially since they could expand and contract the tips. Lining it up with the proper angle allowed them to take out 2 ships at once. The Gojits tried to draw the enemy fire, while the Harkon's chameleon vessels were slingshotted at closer with engines quiet. The spiky mammal drones proved able to absorb multiple hits, with the claws designed to break off from around the craft. The Harkon, meanwhile, caught their nemesis unaware, unloading thousands of missiles and spraying bullets. The technocracy drone we watched from had never ceased firing harpoons, even as our rod supply was running low. I felt satisfaction seeing the enemy ship count plummet. We had them below 100,000 and still falling fast. The automaton we were looking at threw doubled back towards the nearby Doso mechanic ship that explained how they planned to restock the space harpoons on the fly. We switched over to peer through the human vessel's eyes. The defensive formation of our heavy hitters was designed to lure the hostiles forward, almost as if... Something's hidden there, I whispered to Neltor. A cloaked station? The Salmon folded his flippers. I suspect we'll see in a few short moments. When the humans are involved, I hear their fortifications have fortifications. Let us see you can learn a thing or two from that mentality, Zolk added ominously. The enemy crested over our cloaked station, which detonated, unleashing its fragments and destructive power right in the heart of the aggressor's fleet. The Nevox and Physons, who had been nipping near the front lines, were conveniently positioned out of the blast radius. The hidden outpost explosion was the most devastating blow yet, consuming thousands of ships on its own. It damaged thousands more, and the Crocodile took the opportunity to pick those off, targeting plasma through gaping holes in their hulls. Just as the enemy had pulled back with suspicion, and all seemed quiet, a second explosion now tore through the rear guard. Despite having one's placement further out, the humans had waited to draw them deeper in. From the starting number of 150,000 invaders, there was now 80,000. Almost halfway there, whether there is a third station or not. The hostiles are shooting at empty space now. Less bullets shot at us. This is a hopeless fight for them, since we've only lost a few thousand ships even with those aggressive actions. We'll find out if they have a retreat algorithm. The technocracy drones had restocked on harpoons and resumed rattling through their supply. There wasn't a countermeasure available, short of shooting them down or blocking them, and the enemy didn't seem to have physical barricades like we had. After letting our foe shoot at empty space, searching out any other cloaked stations, we deployed some physical barriers. I felt a bit confused as we crept backwards, getting out of range and hunkering down. The hostiles weren't stupid enough to wander into another seeming trap. They shot at the barricades. However, once we'd backed up sufficiently to not be the nearest metal object, that was when the Terrans revealed these were no ordinary barricades. They're gigantic supermagnets, Naltor breathed as the barriers, large enough to obscure spaceships and thus yielding a massive amount of pull, were attracted to nearby hulls. BSC figured out the composition of the enemy's frames at the last battle. Their mines got contracted straight on top of the ship hulls, basically turning them into flying grenades. I wish the Selma General didn't sound so giddy, like a kid at a fishing dock for the first time. The magnets adhered themselves to the hostile ships, and blew them to fighted status itself. Sure enough, the barricades had explosives attached to them. Drone fragments damaged any other vessels in proximity. A chain reaction formed by the truckloads of barricades. For the tens of thousands of United Nations ships, they each had multiple barriers. Even once the first magnet struck, the invaders scarcely had time to respond to that absolute bounty of mines. With our hand played, and our fast retreat allowing more vessels to replenish ammo, the defending spacecraft returned to firing every munition they had. The numbers had been halved down to 40,000 in one snap of the human's fingers. They looked the part of power that defeated the Galactic Empire in mere months, for the first time since this new war began. It was because they were standing shoulder to shoulder with their allies. The support compensated for their shortcomings and let them go to town with the new machinations. Ambassador Korojan gawked at the carnage on screen. Humans are absolute masters at killing inventions, yet you wonder why the shield fears you. Do you people actually need the wingful of ships we brought? Of course we did, Keifer countered. We still do, until no hostile vessels are left standing in our SC system. So soon, we have more than 3 times their ship count now, Onzo chuckled. We didn't want this war, but now that it's here, we damn sure better win it. If there had been a shred of doubt in the battle's outcome, it seemed certain that Nishtar was impregnable. Out of desperation, the invading fleet was unloading every one of their bombs for the planet into our defensive formation. That meant that, even if our vessels all disintegrated now, they'd have nothing to bombard the planet with. The sheer volume of antimatter was enough to stagger us for a moment and cut down 10,000 ships. It almost seemed spiteful on the enemy's behalf, knowing they were lost, and trying to take as many of us with them. We had to finish them quickly. Thousands of harpoon guns were still ripping the enemy apart on our side, ticking down 4 digits worth of kills alone within a brief time. The human drone we attached from now captured a second wave of surface-to-space missiles joining the fray. The invaders couldn't spare any attention to them, and got more hulls smashed in from the explosions. The Vendel moved in to clean up remnants. Even with the ramming stages detached, they had quite the arsenal. The Harken was still chipping in with hidden volleys, and beat-up Gojid vessels dumped every munition they had on their last legs. The United Nations thought that was the right idea, using mini-missiles to exacerbate the damage. The unified forces of the Sabian coalition, 6 digits strong, eliminated the last gasp of enemy resistance in the system. With only a few hundred ships left, we noticed them trying to warp away and escape. A retreat algorithm. The humans gave chase, relishing the easy hunt in the stars. Nishtar had never come close to being in peril, and the hostiles were routed. I could see a blue avian's ambassador shaking with visible relief before flying to the front of the hall. Keifer arched her eyebrows in surprise as Kaiser wrapped his wings around her. She hugged back after a moment's hesitation. Look at what we're capable of when each of our allies shows up to help, the Secretary-General commented. I'm delighted to have such a commanding victory in the books, and to have been able to save Nishtar another glassing. Let's celebrate. To us. Cheers erupted throughout the auditorium, and I joined in with my own happy cries. This was exactly the result the Sabian coalition needed to reaffirm our convictions, and our optimism that we might prevail against an enemy who'd come to destroy civilian lives indiscriminately. As long as we could continue to work together in the future, I was certain that we would come out on top. End of chapter. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.